I put together some information here for you talking about what the drone payloads could be and the surveillance payloads. Now, we know drones can have regular visible cameras, infrared cameras, which sense body heat, which means if you're walking around at night, you're going to be able to be picked up by these drones and targeted by them. Again, they could be in the hands. They could be controlled by a destructive force or an enemy force or a hacker force. They can deploy radiation sensors and microphone sensors. Now, in terms of payloads, here are the drone payloads that I think, are going to see in the next few years. Number one, miniature missiles that can just target individuals, vehicles, or structures, buildings, for example. And this article, by the way, this is on naturalnews.com right now. I don't know yet if it's up on Infowars.com. Probably will be soon if it's not already. Drones can also have high explosive satchel payloads where they simply drop the satchel, it explodes on contact. Drones can have radioactive dirty bomb payloads. This is easy for them to do. They just get a bunch of radioactive dust, which can be collected from a variety of sources. I'm not going to give out the details because I don't want to encourage anybody to try this. It's very dangerous, obviously. And only a true terrorist would try to do something like this, or someone trying to set up a terror type of event for whatever reason they might have in mind. But they could drop radioactive dust on a city at a medium altitude and create just a total chaos in that city. And that would be a terrible situation to see happen. Drones can also have self-destruction bombs where if they are captured or if control is lost, they can self-destruct. So evading these drones is going to be crucial. Now, right after this break, when we come back, I'm going to give you some tactics and techniques to evade drones. And this is a skill that all of us may need to use someday if we want to stay alive if these drones get taken over by bad people. So we'll talk about that on the other side. Stay right with us here on The Alex Jones Show. We'll be right back after this break. And we're back with Terminator music, which is very appropriate today as we are discussing ways to avoid the rise of the machines. In other words, to protect yourself from the drones. You know, it turns out that the rise of the machines depicted in the original Terminator movies is pretty accurate, except they're not going to be bipedal machines, that is, machines running around on the ground with legs. They're going to be flying machines. It turns out it's a lot easier to automate navigation of the air than it is the ground. The ground, ground is very complex. If you've ever looked into robotics, navigating the ground is very complex. But the drones are very easy to deploy in both the ocean, because water is an easy medium into which drones can navigate, and the air. And so you're going to see Navy drones, and you're going to see a lot of then, of course, airborne drones, which we're already starting to see, and they're going to be weaponized very soon. Raytheon, again, is already tested and is about to make available a small missile system that will be carried by drones and will be able to be fired. Of course, the Predators already fire certain types of weapons, but we're talking about domestic drones being able to carry weapons, including potentially small arms fire. Can you imagine your local police department having a drone that can peer into your windows and fire, 223 rounds into your bedroom if they think you're cooking meth or something? I mean, what if they get the wrong address? How many times do they raid the wrong house? Anyway, we are talking here on the Alex Jones Show, and by the way, thank you for joining us. Got a lot of great interviews coming up just straight ahead. And this is Mike Adams filling in case you're wondering, where's Alex? He'll be back, of course, but I'm filling in for him today and tomorrow. But now getting to drone defenses, this is critical. During the daylight, you're going to want to use, of course, and again, let me set the context here, okay? This is if the drones get taken over by bad people, which could be a foreign government with a hack attack. It could be a rogue element of an existing government. It could be who knows what, somebody trying to set up a false flag attack somewhere and use a drone to make something happen. Whatever the case may be, you may find yourself in a situation where you need to avoid the drones in order to stay safe, protect your family, protect your community, protect your liberty, and so on. To do that, first, let's start with the visual element right here, and I brought this. This is an ATAX pattern camo, and the reason that this matters for drone protection, and the pattern is called ATAX, or Advanced Tactical, A-TACS, and the company, this is a licensed trademark pattern, and you'll see it deployed on a lot of military uniforms and things like that these days. This pattern is a fractal pattern, which is a pattern within a pattern, which means that even when you look at it up close, you guys get a shot of it there. For those of you listening on the radio, You can check this out on Prisonplanet.tv and see what I'm talking about. This is a pattern within a pattern, which means if you zoom in and look at it closely, it still looks like camo. The image is kind of blurry, but even from a long ways away, zoomed out, it still has a larger fractal pattern that confuses vision recognition systems of automated drones. Now, I did a little bit of work in my history, not even going to go into the detail, but I have a technology background, as many of you know, from the software industry, and I did a little bit of work in vision recognition systems. Now, vision recognition systems look to find edges. And for example, a vision recognition system is going to try to find a straight line, a square corner, an obvious shape like a circle, like the edge of a person's hat or the edge of a person's head, for example, sharp contrast between colors, things like that. This kind of pattern, this ATAX pattern, confuses vision recognition systems because they can't find any edges in it. So this kind of pattern or netting over vehicles and things like that can protect you from being seen by a drone that might be controlled by bad people with bad intent. Now, moving on to nighttime drones, we've got this. Show and tell time here on the Alex Jones Show. This is you can probably hear this on the radio. This is a Mylar space blanket, or what's called a thermal blanket, and these are available in camping kits and survival kits. These block infrared light, which is a non-visible spectrum, of course, and because of that, they keep the heat inside your body. One of the ways your body loses a lot of heat is by radiating infrared wavelengths. So this Mylar space blanket can keep those in so that you're reflecting heat back to yourself, which is why they're useful on a cold night or as an emergency blanket. They're also great for preventing you from being seen by infrared or thermal imaging systems. And I've tested this and it works great. You simply make a poncho out of it, or you sew it into another poncho that you can drape over your body, and then you can no longer be seen by thermal cameras. This is like camo against the Terminator is what it is. And they're real cheap. I think you can get them sometimes for $2. And you have to sew them in yourself. They're not real durable, but if you have a little bit of sewing skill, you can sew them in. Also, practice light discipline. If you turn on a flashlight at night, you're going to be seen, because the light sensitivity of these drone cameras is very, very high. So those are some of the techniques that you can use to keep yourself safe from drones controlled by bad people. Now, we'll be right back with Jim Mars.
We're on the
much
march.
More.
The Empire's on the run.
Yeah, during the break, we made a Mylar thermal blanket poncho for a little police figurine guy here, and we're showing that on camera right now. There he is. Look at that. He's got his anti-drone Terminator countermeasure poncho. That's on screen at prisonplanet.tv. You can't miss this stuff, folks. If you're listening on the radio, you gotta get the archive videos later by becoming a prisonplanet.tv member. You know, the props are just priceless here, I got to tell you. This was literally running around the office with a pair of scissors, which apparently is dangerous, I think. There's probably a health agency that's going to cite us for doing that here at the Alex Jones Studios. All right, all comedy aside, because we always have to have that element here. Next is a very, definitely not a funny issue, which is oh man, it's too funny. Which is the UN Small Arms Treaty. And we've got Jim Mars joining us by phone. He's the author of numerous books, including a book that should have been called A Zombie Nation, but instead it was, I'll let Jim tell you the story. But he joins us right now by phone to chime in on the UN Treaty, the Small Arms Treaty. And Jim Mars, one of my favorite guests to have on, knows so much about these realms and the whole history of the attacks on liberty and freedom. He joins us right now by phone. Jim, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mike. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Hey, it's great to have you on. I always love having you on the show. What's on your mind these days? What's on your radar screen, so to speak?
Well, I am finishing up the editing on my new book, which should be out after the first of the year, called Our Occulted History.
Occulted history?
Yeah. Now, just so everybody understands, I think one of the first sentences in the book says, now, let's get this straight. This book is not about werewolves, vampires, or devil worshippers, okay? I'm using the word occulted in the astronomical sense. When the moon eclipses the sun, that's called an occultation. And it simply means or masked. So it's, what is our hidden history? What has been hidden from us? And I think it's going to be a real eye-opening read to a lot of people.
Absolutely. I do want to recommend your other books, The $1 Trillion Conspiracy and, of course, Rise of the Fourth Reich. Your books are just extremely well documented, Jim. I mean, extremely well documented. You are one of the best investigative journalists out there today, and I really enjoy your books. But let's get right into... Oh, I'm sorry?
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, and I think people need to understand, if you really want to be an educated person, forget the newspapers and the TV. They're all owned, controlled by one of about 5 major corporations that have interlocking directorships. So in other words, a handful of people are controlling everything you see and hear. If you really want to know what's going on, read major books, okay? And the reason I say this is we haven't got time, and you wouldn't even want to hear how many hoops I have to jump through just to get something published by a major publisher.
I believe you.
They have nitpicking editors, and they have legal staffs that go through it with a fine-tooth comb. How do you know this? How do you know that? Have you got more than one source? Can you prove this? Can you prove that? Okay? But that's good, because when you read a major book from a major publisher, and it's got an index, it's got footnotes, then you know that it's been gone over by a number of people, and you're probably getting the straight stuff.
Yeah.
There are a number of websites now that tout, send us your press release, and we'll make sure it gets to the whole media. I could name off for you, but you know what I'm talking about, Mike, right?
Oh, yeah, and most of the time the media just rewrites the corporate press releases, slaps their own name on it, and releases it as factual news without checking a single fact.
That was my point. I was reading the other day a fellow who works for one of these outfits, and he says it used to be that they would at least rewrite these press releases that come in from corporations and companies. He said, but he's noticed lately that he sees his own press releases, and he knows they're his because he wrote them, and they're in his words, and they're just being repeated by the so-called news media.
Word for word. It is absolutely incredible. But that's how we get news on the TV of things like mercury in vaccines is good for your children. Didn't you know? It boosts their immune system. We should have more mercury.
Yeah, a little aspartame won't hurt you.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know what? Some of the stuff is probably true. Like a little aspartame might not hurt you, but the problem is it's cumulative. It just keeps building up your system until your system's just fried.
Well, sure. I mean, there's so many myths out there that the mainstream media pushes. And by the way, we're going to get to this UN treaty in just a second, but I have a comment here. You know, one of the myths is that war is great for the economy. It's great. So, you know, I always say to people who and a lot of people believe that, people who are smart enough to know better, I always say to them, well, great, then why don't we just bomb all our own cities and we'll experience total abundance by rebuilding them?
Hey, that's true. That's true. It'd be an instant urban renewal program.
Yeah.
You start with some cluster bombs and cutter charges, and then you go in and you start rebuilding everything.
Yeah, it's just such a fallacy. But let's get to the big issue today. The UN,
the big arms thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
This just for one thing, I'm sure your listeners are probably well aware of this small arms treaty and the fact that they're still negotiating up in New York. But I can guarantee you that just like City Hall, when they have a city council meeting and they come out and they say, we've approved this, we haven't approved that, we're looking into this, that's all been done ahead of time, okay?
Sure.
So the real negotiations going on behind the scenes somewhere. And but anyway, I'm sure that you and your listeners are pretty well aware of what's happening and why. But let's talk about, let's look a little deeper and see what's really going on here. There are those who are arguing, well, it's no big thing. It only talks about, they're only trying to curb the illegal international arms trade, whatever that means.
Right, that's the cover story. It won't affect law-abiding firearms owners.
Right. And the thing is, at one level,